Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm just going to give it, as normal, a few minutes to allow everyone to join the meeting. Actually, we've got quite a number of people on already, so that's great. People on time. Hi, Kirsty. Big wave out, everyone. Everyone, it should be. This is, I think, called Teams webinar, so it's a new format from Microsoft that I've certainly been made aware of. So you will naturally be muted. I think I have the power to unmute you when we get to that stage. But first and foremost, I'm just going to start with a presentation. So hopefully you can all see this. Thumbs up, folks, if you can see the presentation. Okay, brilliant. Now, well, thank you very much for giving up. And hopefully it'll only be about between half an hour and 45 minutes of your time on this big news item day. I'm hoping to give you an insight to the Housing Digital Blueprint, what it's about. It's a new and exciting, innovative solution that the sector, I think, is desperately in need of. But we have a number of speakers today. But first of all, I'm just going to go through the agenda. So this is the welcome. Consider yourself welcome and very much. Hopefully you'll find this incredibly interesting, if not innovative and new to the sector, as I said. Tim Pitts is going to be first. I'll go through the speakers in a second. We're going to go through the triple value impact story. A bit of a background to the digital blueprint itself, because the Housing Digital Blueprint is the son or the daughter, so to speak, of an original local authority blueprint, which Tim's going to talk about. We're going to talk about why social housing and why now. John Bunt's on the call as well, who I will introduce in a minute or two. I will then go into a little bit more detail as well about why we believe the blueprint is ready, or why the sector is ready for the blueprint, based on what Jonathan says. I will then go through how the blueprint works in a little bit more detail, what it's all about, how it works in practice, why we believe it's like a grandiose statement from Colin Sales, CEO at 3C Consultants. A number of you will know Colin as a well-known face in the sector, and Colin is one of our digital partners in the blueprint. So he will go through why he believes being a partner and why this is a really good initiative for the sector, and then we'll have a close. So as I said, the speakers, if you don't know me, my name's obviously Dave Loudon. I'm a partner now with Triple Value Impact. I've been doing consultancy in the social housing sector for 20 years. I've also been a director in a social housing association, and I've been a board member as well, like Jonathan. I recently joined Triple Value Impact to build and deliver the Housing Digital Blueprint, which is what you're hearing about today. I'd also like to introduce Tim Pitts, the co-founder, one of the three co-founders of Triple Value Impact, who's going to give you a bit of background, as I said. Jonathan Bunt comes under many names, but an affordable housing specialist is what it says on LinkedIn. But also, Jonathan, you're a board member of a number of landlords, and you're an independent consultant as well. So I'm very much welcoming John and Tim, and then finally, but not least, Colin Sales, who again a number of you will know is a well-known leader in the sector around technology, and Colin's going to delve into a little bit more detail about one of the opportunities we have. So without further ado, the TVI story and background to the first digital blueprint. Tim, over to you.
Thank you, and lovely to see you all on this webinar today. So the background to Triple Value Impact is we were speaking with many chief execs and CFOs across local authorities. That's where we started. And there was a very sort of familiar sort of story from all of them. Financial pressures won't be anything new, never-ending increasing on demand, again, nothing particularly new. But the traditional ways of getting to transforming the organisation using the usual sort of players just takes a long time and costs a lot of money, and they needed something much quicker. And with all the digital capabilities, which are getting better and better the whole time, there's quite a common view that we should be borrowing, stealing, finding what other people can do and using ourselves so we can accelerate our transformation very quickly. And that's effectively what was behind the original thinking around Triple Value Impact. So it's about finding not just efficiencies, but also how can you improve the experience for the end user in housing? Obviously, that's the tenants, but in local authorities, it could be any social user or end user. How can you improve the experience for officers? And then how do you improve the overall outcomes for the local authorities and now housing associations? So the digital blueprint concept is basically built on the it's based on looking at the sort of big spend and income areas of every part of your organisation, and then looking at everything from the aspect of demand. So it's not about just putting processes online. Yeah, the presentation's gone blank, Dave, for some reason. But the yeah, okay. So it's looking at everything from the perspective of demand, and not how do you just automate things, but how can you get ahead of the demand? Can you delete it by pre-anticipating it? Can you defer the demand as long as possible? Can you drive up demand where you're trying to raise extra income, etc.? And then codifying all that in a big calculator. So using your own data, we will come up for each of the opportunities, work out what the rough order of magnitude is for each of those opportunities. And then the other big thing we've done is scoured the market for the best technologies we can find to answer those particular problems. Many you'll be familiar with, but there'll be lots of new ones which we brought in from outside the sector to hopefully accelerate. And it's proved exceptionally successful in local authorities. In just over 2 years doing it in local authorities, about unitaries and counties have now adopted the model, and a lot are now reaping some very strong rewards. You can see quite a few of their articles on LinkedIn, etc. So that's the background to TBI and the digital blueprint.
Thank you, Tim. No, thanks, Tim. Just checking I wasn't muted. So again, with that background in mind and the success story of the local government blueprint, it was thought that why not replicate this in social housing as best we can. So I was brought on board to do that. Just a brief introduction to the journey so far. Why social housing? Because we believe as a business, the local government blueprint, as Tim's just perfectly described, is transferable to the sector of social housing with councils, but predominantly at this stage, housing associations. And just to say thanks, there's quite a number of housing associations on the call today. Why social housing? I'm going to hand over to John in a second, but for me, I believe the time is right for people to look at doing things differently. I think the example is there out there that there's been many failed projects, people overspending on projects, people under delivering on projects, taking too long to do it, and if I can get rather emotive for a second, it only really does the main person any injustice is the tenant at the end of the day, who effectively pays for that. So I will go into that in a little bit more detail, but Jonathan, I'd like to hear. I think people would prefer to hear from yourself in this instance.
It's a very rare beast that people are opting for me over other folk. Good afternoon, everyone. As Dave said, my name is Jonathan Bunt. I am here as the kind of non-techie scene setter for the whole piece. Whilst my background is in local government, which is where I first met Tim, my current life mostly revolves around the housing association space. I am the vice chair of Golden Lane Housing, and I'm also a non-exec director and chair of the Audit and Risk Committee at Islington and Shoreditch in North London. So very familiar with how the whole kind of sector is challenged. And if I go back to my days in local government, the solution to a whole host of problems was always, well, we need a new system. And I now see the same in the social housing sector as a non-exec director. And the reality for me is they don't tend to be small things. These are often big systems. We're seeking out, a new CRM, a new finance system, a new social care solution, a new housing management solution. And what we actually get is some fabulously shiny demos, often underwritten with wonderfully, hugely positive business cases, which offer, improved performance, improved satisfaction, savings, all the way through to contributions towards climate change and world peace. And what we get is these sort of massive, all-encompassing programs that ultimately drain enormous amounts of organizational capacity, often over quite long periods of time. And as Dave sort of alluded to there in his few words beforehand, so many of these are, that I've seen across the sort of the last 20 years, failed, delayed, compromised implementations. And we get to that point of go live, and to steal one of Dave's favorite phrases, actually what happens is we say, is that it? Actually, we've had all these things come through, and the response is, well, what were all the things we promised? Where are they? And that has an enormous impact on the culture of the organization and the morale of the organization. And I think that's what I see a lot. I'd like to say this was a kind of a more historic, but actually as a non-exec, we've had fairly recent experience of this with a new corporate system in the last 12 months or so. And as a non-exec, I find myself asking to the executive's eternal irritation, but what was it supposed to do? And we're not very good at actually going back to the business cases and looking at what was expected. And I often find myself pressing quite substantially for a sort of gap analysis and a plan that we have to then bridge those gaps. And that's hugely important. And and we need to realise those benefits that we were promising to the organisation. But often that just means we bring in more or different support, it elongates the whole process, and the frustration adds and the cost adds. And I'm not sure we ever fully recover from that "is that it" moment with the workforce in particular. And right now, the social housing sector, as you'll all know, is under enormous pressure to deliver service improvements for our residents, quite rightly, address the issues with our homes that are well documented, respond to multiple government agendas, find financial savings, and actually more generally, what I would refer to as just being a good landlord, because that's actually why we're all there. Talking to Tim then about the work that was done in local government, about breaking away from some of those big system solutions and how we read that across to the housing sector. And we started talking about where those big challenges for landlords are and how the local government blueprint could therefore be replicated. And so on and off for the last year or so, I've acted as a little bit of a sounding board for Tim and co, sharing fairly simplistically things that I worry about. And I think will all be familiar to you. So, rents, repairs, damp and mold. There's no kind of great mystery to these things. We all know where the challenges are and what we need to do about it. And therefore, what Dave and Tim are going to talk us through is that kind of sense of a much smaller, quicker, specific targeted interventions using some of those new products that are there now, technologies and innovations that can deliver that kind of step change improvement and savings. But most importantly for me, that real focus on how we quantify and measure success rather than kind of getting lost in this kind of big sort of airy fairy shiny demo, big promises, actually very little outcome. That's my scene setter. Dave, happy to hand back.
Brilliant, thanks, John. And I think just to pick up on a few points there that I was going to talk about, I think one thing that's that we have to all appreciate is that the sector is at an incredible crossroads, if you can call it that, at the moment. Everyone's incredibly busy. Landlords, chief executives, boards, committees, the day-to-day people that are acting as housing officers and doing repairs. I wouldn't quite say it's on its knees. There's some good things happening, but we are under a lot of pressure, both from a regulatory, which we haven't talked about a bit too much yet. John hinted at it, and just the day-to-day backlogs of repairs, arrears. So why social housing and why now? I feel that the challenge the social housing sector has at the moment is because there's so much going on, we're firefighting. And it's an excuse to people to say we cannot look at technology in bite-sized chunks to be able to improve certain things, and I'll go through that as well. John mentioned which I will talk about shortly as well. I do not think we as a sector are very, and this might be slightly controversial, but I don't think we're very, very good at doing business cases on how to adopt technology. It goes back to John's point that when my phrase "is that it," usually evolves after a big implementation because the business case hasn't scoped out the project very well. And how often can you honestly say as a landlord in this call, or as a consultant, or as a tech provider, that people come to you after it's implemented, 6 months afterwards, a year after, or 2 years, and every year, and measure the success of the project based on what was very, very initially. I see Colin smiling because he's been through this like I have over the years. Too many people saying, is that it? And what are we measuring it against? Well, in some cases, people can't find what to measure it against because it wasn't scoped out in the first place. Another thing that I think is when it comes to technology, and Tim mentioned that we look at a whole range of tech solutions, and we're constantly doing that. We're constantly evolving. So there's people on this call that I know that are not on the blueprint yet. So we need to talk to tech companies to hear what you've got, to hear what you're constantly evolving, to see what great technology you can deploy, or we can help you deploy into the social housing sector. And so the noise is incredible at the moment. If you're an IT leader or a business leader, you will get bombarded. You'll see it conference after conference after conference, bombarded with, our solution can do this, our solution can do that, we can save you money, we can make you do things better, we can reduce your mold and damp disrepair claims. Well, what we have done is done all that research over the last 9 months to a year. So hopefully that explains a little bit about why social housing and why now. Just to finish off, the business case we'll talk about in a little bit more detail, but just as a heads up, you will find an article from me in the next edition of Housing Executive, talking about the need for change and how the business case itself is incredibly important. So moving on, how it works. You'll be thinking, well, it's all very good. So Tim explained briefly how the original blueprint works. The concept is very much the same. Just to go through the first, so it all kicks off with a workshop. We sit down with a landlord, and I've seen it in action for the council, and the leadership team there, the executive team are there, middle management there, whoever we decide is there to go through each and every single opportunity. I will go through one of those opportunities. We've got over 30 at the moment in the Housing Digital Blueprint. We have, to give you an idea of scale, got 27 partners as well. So obviously 1 or 2 of those partners can deliver more than one solution. We have one of our partners today in Colin Sales with 3C Consultants, who has one of the opportunities we can present. So we sit down with a customer, a housing association / council, and we run through every opportunity in a matter of minutes. And again, I'll show you one of these in a second. We then display, Tim mentioned a calculator. Behind a lot of this is what we call the calculator, the blueprint calculator, where we have spent months and we have business analysts that have worked with the partners that we have to calculate, if you were to apply it to X, Y, and Z housing association, then this is the return on investment, or here's the efficiencies you can gain. So you will, just as a quick aside as well, the landlords on the call have already, we can see, access to calculator and a link that was pre-sent to you. So if you're also interested and you haven't seen that yet, then please give me a shout after this, and I will send you a link to the calculator that shows you, for the Housing Digital Blueprint, what efficiencies you can gain from deploying each and or every single opportunity. During the workshop, we obviously gain interest, whether the landlord wants to proceed or not proceed with each single one. So we take a whole listings of priorities and we then move on from there. What I would say is that in the workshops to date that I've seen, we get a lot of traction, and the calculations behind this, we preempt a lot of this by showing people up front what they can and cannot achieve with the blueprint. So the first stage 1, is over a 1-month period from beginning to end, but it takes time to build the workshop, arrange the workshop, have it in person. We do that in person. It's not virtual. We sit down with you. It's incredibly important to look people in the eyes with us to see how they're struggling. If you can bear with me as well, I'm going to step back a little bit in time at this moment, because what I wanted to also do is tell you that the research we've done building the blueprint and to be able to give you all of these opportunities has been over a 9 months to a year's period, where we have looked at the sector, we have worked with our partners to build those calculations. That's why there's a little picture of a calculator there. So the workshop happens, then we move into something which I think is I'm pretty certain is unique, and something that has proven to be incredibly successful in the local government space. So you have a range of opportunities you wish to take forward. I'll go through some of those opportunities in a minute. And then what you do is go through a process called fast track validation. And that basically is us building, and go back to John's point, this is where it starts to make sense. We build a very detailed business case, and we also do a number of things. We bring in enterprise architects to see how it works with your existing architecture. A PJD is what we call a procurement justification document. What we've also done is agreed with all our partners a way that the landlord or the council can direct award to this opportunity if the business case stacks up for you and you want to go ahead. You can see the efficiencies. It gets approved by perhaps people like Jonathan and a board of or committee of management or a board of a landlord. So that's what we do from the fast track value. Now that all happens in a sprint or a series of sprints in a 12-week period. This is fundamentally one of the key aspects of the blueprint, folks, where we want to do this at pace. We mentioned the noise and we mentioned the difficulties of failed projects. One of the reasons that landlords I have seen, and please forgive me if you're one of the examples where everything you do goes like clockwork and it goes on time and you don't overspend your budget, and it's fantastic. But that's not the case that I've seen over the last 20-something years. And the point being is that it takes too long to get from the twinkling in a service lead's eye, say we need a new system that will look at compliance or data management or voids or you name it, route scheduling, repairs-based tools. The time that goes to writing a specification, which is usually too long, too complicated, the procurement route takes too long, is complicated, and you end up getting just a tick box exercise, and then it comes back to the point John made about people turning around and saying, is that it? That's because the business case wasn't done properly, the procurement justification wasn't done properly, the enterprise architecture wasn't looked at properly, and so on. So the point being is we've done a lot of this up front as well, where we've taken your figures and started to build the business case for every landlord in the UK. And that calculator is available at request. Once that happens, we hope that it would be signed off by the landlord or the council, and that would then move into an implementation stage where either TVI can help manage that implementation with the digital partner. It could be, Colin's one of the partners here with 3C Consultants, or 3C Consultants go off and implement their solution, as may be the other partners as well. So that gives you a feel for how the blueprint works. If I just go back a second, you'll see in the bottom left-hand side, there's a tiny little maroon colored page. For each opportunity, this is what it looks like. So this is one that I'm not going to go through in any detail, but this is what you would see in the workshop. You would see over 30 to up to 40 of these. This is number 7. It's called Improved Data Management. Every single slide is the same, where we go through with the management team and the exec team and managers. So this would be of interest to, we call it, you can see the top right, a corporate efficiency, but there's some that are specific to asset management, some are specific to finance or income management. So for every single one, you get the same concept, folks. So bear with me here. You get a context and challenge. I'm not going to read it out. You don't want to hear me read out, trust me. But basically it sets the scene for the audience, and again, we put in some facts and some figures there. By this solution, that we have seen examples of 10 days work done in 10 minutes. That's not a grandiose statement. Well, it is grandiose, but it's absolutely brilliant. You should see some of the other solutions we've got in compliance and some of the efficiencies we can gain. So we have to ask ourselves when we do this, and landlords say, well, why are we not seeing that efficiency to date? That's because there's been a huge, in my opinion, a huge reliance, like John mentioned as well, and Colin on the call might touch upon this in a minute or two, around the failure or the assumption that a housing management system will do everything. We're looking at, and here's the words to remember, best of breed solutions that fix specific things for specific problems. This is one of the wider sense areas, and Colin, just after this call, is going to talk about it in a bit more detail. So we talk about the opportunity, what it brings to the landlord, mitigating risks, provides insight, safeguards. Now, if anyone's wondering what triple value impact means, well, the triple values are outcomes, experience, and efficiencies. And for every single opportunity, we go through that. So, you know, again, I'm not going to make this one, I'm not going to go through it in any detail because I'm aware of time. So what I would like to do now is hand over to Colin to expand a little bit. Colin, I'm more than happy to bring that slide back up if you want. But it's over to you to explain why you wanted to, well, first of all, why this game with Triple Value Impact as a partner.
No, absolutely, Dave. Thank you. And applaud some of the things I've heard already. I'm going to also be a little bit controversial now, but focusing very much on the consultancy sector, something that's obviously made a very good living for me over the many years. But there is a flaw. And I'd like to just talk about that because this is where I think that the blueprint kind of helps address the problem. So we've been going for over 10 years and we've made a tremendous amount of, careful how I say it, but we have made a lot of money over the years from providing consultancy, generally helping people move from one piece of software to another. The sector, social housing sector, has been fairly transfixed with the fact that if it has problems with its systems, then it's probably to do with the software they're using, and therefore by changing the software, the problem will be solved. And that's clearly, as many of you know, not been the case. And from a consultancy point of view, although it has been quite lucrative, and you can often, I think, as John said earlier, find yourself with projects that go on for a couple of years and provide a very regular income. At the end of it, you found yourself in a position where you wonder what's actually been achieved. You know, people have often moved from one supplier to another who they're still not particularly happy with, and those promises and outcomes that they thought they were going to have almost disappear, and they found themselves in a loop where they've kind of gone from the frying pan into the fire. And this doesn't fit with our mission as an organization either, which is to help organizations to use data and technology to empower them to provide social value. And so, you know, we've got to look at ourselves and say, well, are we doing things right? You know, are we making a difference to those people who are living and working in social housing? And the answer, we felt, was no. So we took a view of ourselves about 4 years ago, and we now have a focus on information rather than technology. The technology is only the empowerer of getting the information that you need to run your organization effectively. So it's much more now about helping people to focus on what's actually important, which is the information, and that kind of aligns very much with what the regulator of social housing, you've probably heard, is saying all the time. In fact, they're actually appear to be saying now that data related problems are the biggest significant risk to social housing providers now. So just look at the recent sector risk profile and you'll see that in the first paragraph. So now there's much more of a focus now on information management rather than on technology such as replacing your housing management system. Now, the reason I go through that story is that the TVI digital blueprint is a very similar kind of philosophy. It takes a look at things that have been proven before. It looks at outcomes rather than inwardly looking at a social housing provider's problems, and it provides a fast track way of solving those problems and getting outcomes. If we look again at the traditional consulting model, it usually starts with a consultant going in and going through a whole discovery process, which in itself can take weeks, and that's fed to a degree by the fact that social housing providers traditionally have all felt they're very different from each other, and therefore they need very different solutions. The fact is they don't. They've got a huge number of things in common, and this is where the blueprint kind of draws into that by saying that these are the things that actually work, and by adopting them, not only will you fast track what you need to try and achieve, but the likes of TVI have already paid for all the research that needs to be done. They're already trying to check that these things are compatible with each other. So, you know, if things change in the future, you don't suddenly find yourself with different systems that won't talk to each other. You know, they're doing all this up front, and you're not having to pay for it if you're taking this kind of approach. So for me, the blueprint is a much better way of actually getting some results, tangible results, than the more traditional consulting method, which I have to accept we have been partially responsible for. So I hope that gives you a bit of a feel as to why we're dedicated to working with TVI and the blueprint. I'll hand back to you now, Dave. If anyone has any questions, more than happy to answer.
Thanks, Colin. I think no, that is absolutely perfect. And obviously we have spent that time, that research, that development time into looking at technologies, how they work together. But it's not all about, as again, I'm going to write in this article, or you're going to see in this article, it's not all about the technology. It's about the process and about how we are realistic and allowing landlords the time to rapidly see the benefits of technology. If you look at technology and you implement something over 3 years, by the time you get to that 3-year period, new technology already is out there. So nobody's going to thank you for taking that length of time. So it's about pace. Just a quick overview of some of the perhaps the other technologies, or let's say, I say technologies, we call it in the terminology that we use in TVI is opportunities. The opportunity, okay, it may well be through a digital technology or a solution or sensors or something, but we have solutions from some of the most well-known and out of sector as well, consultants, tech providers, and we're constantly looking outside. So there's a ever-evolving process of looking at what technology, what digital solutions, not just a product, but for example, AI, machine learning, we have a whole range of solutions in there. Can't believe we've got to, what, 33 minutes in, and I don't think anyone's mentioned AI yet. So there you go, that's a result. But I'm soon going to change that, because one of our solutions is about maximizing income, looking at arrears through AI. We have a compliance-based solution that is well known in the sector. Again, how we can deploy and build a business case for that if you've not using it already. Voids, AI-assisted video-based augmented reality, subletting fraud. You would be amazed that disrepair claims and subletting fraud is another area. Augmented reality and repairs, route scheduling, you will know can bring great efficiency. So you can start to see a feel for these. We have a partner that does IoT technology and sensors on mold and damp. Currently doing with a big council in the north of England as part of local government. So we'll go through that. So virtual stock surveys, simple things like SARS and FOIs, the efficiencies that can begin using AI technology to do that. Contract intelligence, again, looking at contracts through AI, scanning them, coming up with suggestions, loopholes, problem areas, wrong appendices, and so on. So yeah, Colin, that does make sense to us. I am going to at this stage say thanks. If there's any questions, I can open it up. I'm going to stop sharing at the moment. If I can see if there's any questions, Jay, on the chat. Oh, there's quite a few. So how are we going to do this? Let's see. If anyone wants to put their hand up as well, please, we'll try and do this. This is being recorded. It's using the webinar function of Teams, so hopefully we'll get that to all the audience as well.
There's a question from Gavin on there.
Okay, let's see. There's quite a few questions actually. Gavin, so I understand this correctly. TVA has a model that effectively hooks you up with tech, non-tech solutions based on clear metrics and measures for your organization. What guarantees does TVI or the solution provider offer to guarantee on the delivery of the suggested benefits? So we have a range of partners. Obviously, we have a contractual relationship with that partner. At the end of the day, the delivery model is up to the partner to deliver that. We can help with that. But we have built a series of opportunities that we believe can make serious, as you say, efficiencies. And I think the word we haven't used so much, Gavin, to yet, as yet, is efficiencies. This is efficiency-based solutions. We're looking at things that can make a considerable difference to even things like tenant satisfaction measures, repairs being done better, more effective management of mold and damp, for example. Compliance can be done in a fraction of the time. Rent collections can be done better. So the contract, the consultancy piece up front, the workshop, the FTV, and the production of the business case and the procurement justification is you then the end contractors with the partner. Hopefully that answers your question, Gavin. Let's see if there's any more.
Could I answer one that Max has raised, Dave?
Yeah, please.
He asked the question if the top technology we're talking about is off-the-shelf products. No, not necessarily. In fact, if we look at one of the huge problems the sector has had, it's bespokement of products. So one of the challenges is the business models of the suppliers. The suppliers make, or a significant part of their revenue comes from encouraging organizations to bespoke their software. By bespoking their software, there's a whole revenue stream there that's not just about bespoking it in the first place, but also whenever new generations of the software come out, they have to go through bespoking it all over again. Not only that, it makes it far more difficult for an organization to leave them because they have a system that they've invested heavily in bespoking, and to move to another system, you lose all of that. So yeah, one of the challenges really is we all do need to try and adopt as much as we possibly can best practice. And again, that feeds back into the blueprint.
Yeah, if I can just add to that. So the aim of the digital blueprint is to really simplistically give the ability to look at a whole load of things very quickly, validate them very quickly through a very concentrated but in-depth fast track validation process, and then implement quickly. So the vast majority of things you should just be able to take off the shelf and implement quickly, the vast majority, but not all. As Colin says, there'll be some variations to that. But that's what's made the blueprint in local government work so well, because people can go, right, I understand, you clearly understand the context, you clearly understand the technology, you now clearly understand us as an organisation, and so you can help us get this technologies adopted really, really quickly and relatively safely as well. Sitting behind guarantees and commercials, that's a whole separate conversation, to be honest. But as I say, it's all about speed and getting to those answers as quick as you can. The other thing worth saying on that point is it's certainly in local government, and I would assume it's similar in housing, people like to do pilots. So if you're going to put IoT sensors in, people like to put, well, let's try it out in 20 houses. That's not going to drive value. What we're putting in front of you are things we've tested, we know work. So IoT sensors is a good example. The solution which we're recommending in the housing digital blueprints, also in the local government one, literally last Friday we just had a huge thousands of sensors signed off for one particular local authority. So we've helped them make that shift from, well, let's try something because we need to get comfortable with it first, let's do 50 to 20, 50, whatever it is. We've helped them get to 2,000 because we've given them the confidence and a very robust process to get them there quickly. We're seeing that with adult social care tech, so tech-enabled care. Again, that's relevant for sheltered housing in this sector. But yeah, the principle is trying to get you through it quickly, safely, and get you to the accelerated value as quickly as we can. It's a very different model from what most normal, the sort of traditional offers in the sector.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things to just add on to that, Tim, is that moving at pace is one thing, but building a very detailed business case allows you to see that. What we also look at in the business case, for example, isn't just this is what you get from it, this is the outcomes, this is the efficiencies. We look at the implementation plans. One of the failings in the sector is we don't implement software very well. I think Colin hinted at that as well. We tend to kind of jump in with 2 feet around bespoke, and then before you know it, I was going to say it begins. No, I'm not going to swear. It's another word for customizing beyond belief. It begins with B. And there's a few smiles, so I think you know what I'm talking about. I'm just trying to be a bit posh today because I'm in my professional capacity. But the point being is that we're not in this to kind of say start with this and then end up with this. This is vetted. This is pre-calculated. We've done all the preemptive work, so it's almost on a plate for you. But we still need to build the business case because this is a starter for 10. And by building the business case, you start to see it come to life. It's also very important to look at how you procure things, because that's again another way of making sure you fail in your project, procuring things, and how you implement it. So I'm wondering if there's any other questions here. There's quite a few.
There's a couple of questions come from Geraint and Aaron, all around this point around housing management systems and data sources.
Yeah.
In answer to your question, Geraint, I think the answer is absolutely. What you do need is some form of data lake, data factory. If you listen to what the regulator is saying, they want a golden thread through all your data. They want one version of the truth. And going to your point, Aaron, the problem with your systems is generally they are reliant on an ERP or one particular system, but there are usually countless other systems and spreadsheets around an organization, certainly in the average housing association, which means that the data can be very difficult to get this one version of the truth and to validate and properly audit, so that when you're reporting that you are telling the whole case and not just a version of what you have stored somewhere.
I couldn't agree more. And on that point that Aaron mentioned later on as well, is that yes, there is always a risk about distributing things, but I would have said that was a case, that a real worry 10, 15, 20 years ago, where it was really hard to integrate things, and the maturity models around data lake warehouses didn't exist. But what we've been very careful to look at in the solution is to bring in a solution that can help do that. And you're looking at one of the partners today that can build that. It's not an easy task, but when you distribute your architecture, you need to be very. Aaron's right. I know Aaron well. You're absolutely right, Aaron. That you need to be very careful on where that data sits, how it's managed, and who owns it, and so on. There's just briefly, I think we're about 2 minutes to go. Coffee says, seems like a huge issue with migration of data. Why does data have to sit on a platform as opposed? We're getting into specific questions around data, and the challenge with these kind of sessions, as we're talking about the blueprint and giving you an oversight, is that we can delve into a whole rabbit warren of areas with data on integration and so on. But folks, that's us. I can't believe we're out of time already. Sorry, Tim.
For those authorities, housing associations who signed in advance, have you had a chance to look at the calculator? I've seen quite a few have logged in. Just wondered if you had any questions on that before we drop off.
Quite good to see any thumbs up or comments on the before we finish up.
Looks like we've had quite a few people manage to log in, which is good. So
yeah, we can see that. Just to let you know, that for folks that aren't a landlord, the calculator, we can send a link to each landlord that shows them their data and their efficiencies gained, and we can see that when they log into the system called AirRange, that they can do it. So we do know that people have looked at it. So I will follow up, Tim, with everyone that's on the call and see what they think of that, and to arrange a call where they look at the savings that they've realised. So unless there's anyone else got one burning last question, I think that's done. And thank you everyone for the kind words in the comments. Okay, everyone, have a good rest of your Thursday. See you soon, no doubt. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye bye.